Welcome to Muswell Hill Baptist Church. In this ministry video, we're going to be thinking about a biblical view of the passing of our late Queen Elizabeth II. And we have been doing that in two services during the 10 days of national mourning. In this video, we're going to think about a word which meant a lot to the Queen, means relatively little to most of the rest of us, but means a great deal to Jesus and to God, and is certainly a word we can learn about from her life in her death. It is the word duty. We may qualify that as Christian duty. In her Christmas message in 2012, the Queen said, "We remember that God sent his only Son to serve, not to be served. He restored love and service to the center of our lives in the person of Jesus Christ." And it cannot be denied that the Queen, over her phenomenal 70 years as Queen and as a public servant as well as sovereign, demonstrated how she had grasped that her role was not to be served, though most people would say it was, but to serve. And it seems without much doubt that the Queen will be remembered as someone who served rather than someone who was served. This is not a quality that would be found in many sovereigns, emperors, and the like through history. And the reason why she was different was not a personality thing. It was because she believed in the teaching and the person and indeed the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, her Lord. Luke chapter 17, Jesus says, "Suppose one of you has a servant ploughing or looking after the sheep. Will you say to the servant when he comes in from the field, 'Come along now and sit to eat'? Won't he rather say, 'Prepare my supper, get yourselves ready and wait on me while I eat and drink? After that, you may eat and drink'? Will he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? So you also, when you have done everything you were told to do, should say, 'We are unworthy servants. We have only done our duty.'" This concept of duty was deep in the life of Elizabeth, and down even to the hymns that she chose for her funeral service. Her life demonstrated that she did indeed recognize she was a servant first and a sovereign second. In that illustrative comment of Jesus to his disciples, who of course did not have servants, they were fishermen, tax collectors and whatever, but well understood the notion of the household servant in the Roman Empire. When Jesus spoke to his disciples, one of the things he indicated was that the servant's job, first of all, is to complete what they've been given to do. He points out that when the servant is halfway through his tasks, he's worked in the field, but he has also to prepare the meal, It is not likely that the master is going to say, well done for doing part of your job, come and sit with me, now you've finished. Because he hasn't finished. The servant has work to do. When the servant has served the master with his evening meal, then the servant can sit down and eat and drink. It is a fundamental thing about duty that you have to finish it. It's not a hobby. It's not a personal fulfillment. It's a duty. And of course, that's one of the reasons why the Queen continued to be the Queen right to the very, very last, when 2 days before she died, in that sense unexpectedly, even though she was very old, she welcomed in a new Prime Minister in her official capacity as the sovereign. She worked to the very end. And this is what duty is in part. Now, I can't tell you how many over the years in different countries, in different churches, of different ages, of different genders, I've met Christian people who have basically stopped doing their duty. People who used to be very involved in serving God, who kind of go AWOL and stop serving God altogether. Not because of a frailty, not because of anything that could be construed to be a necessity, but just because they're fed up with doing it. God gives us our life, our every breath, and it is our task to do what he has given us to do. And in this world, there is no exclusion from Christian service. There are variations in it. There are seasons in it. There are lulls, ebbs and flows, if you will, in it. But there is never a point when it isn't the right thing to be. Jesus called his disciples to him. And they continued to be his disciples till the day when most of them died as martyrs, from what we can gather from history. The second point, however, is even more telling. When the servant in Jesus' story has done all of the tasks, the servant should not be expecting great thanks from the master. This was what you were set to do. It is your duty. We reflected on this a little bit with the service for the royal family. Now, I'm sure there were polite thanks, and there was a fuss in the newspapers about the pallbearers and so forth. But the vast majority of the military people who served in that capacity, either as pallbearers or as guards, would not have been sent great messages of thanks. They were doing their duty. They didn't do it even as a favour. They did it as a duty. They didn't volunteer to do it. They were commanded to do it. It's a very different setting to the civilian setting that many of us are much more familiar with. Now, this doesn't mean a lack of appreciation. It is contextualizing what it is we do. When we serve Jesus, we are not doing him a favour. And therefore, we don't deserve lots of thanks from him. Now, listen, it's the job of the pastor to say thank you to people. I have been reminded of that many a time over the years. It's the job of the church to say thank you to people who volunteer and help in it in all sorts of ways. We're not saying we shouldn't say thank you to one another. But what God says at the end of a Christian's life is actually kind of indicated in one of the other parables. Well done, good and faithful servant. Well done. You have done your job. Well done isn't the same as thank you. It's nice, but it's not the same as thank you. Thank you is an appreciation for something you didn't have to do. Well done is an acknowledgement of the way that you have done what you should have done and that you did it well. It might sound like playing with words, but it isn't playing with words, because it's very tempting, especially in an age when we put ourselves first, to think that we're doing God a favour by going to church. We're doing God a favour by helping at church. We're doing God a favour by doing evangelism. We're doing God a favour by bringing someone to church. We're doing God a favour by not committing adultery. None of this is true. It's our duty. We're not doing God a favour. All the favours are the other way. God does us all the favours, and we say thanks to him. But what God does do is acknowledge when someone has served him faithfully. Well done, good and faithful servant. But not thanks ever so much for what you did. That's not what God is required to say. Will he thank the servant for doing what he was required to do? Jesus asks, expecting the answer no. But it gets even more devastating than that. So you also, when you have done everything you were told to do, should say, we are unworthy servants, we have only done our duty. Now look, this is even more important. It's not just teaching us what God should say to us. It's teaching us what we should say to ourselves. What we say is we are unworthy servants. Now, does that mean that we have done a bad job? No. No, it's not that. We have been unworthy servants reflects the fact that everyone who is human and serves God, except Jesus, everyone who serves God is unworthy to serve God. The angels are worthy. The archangels are worthy. They're still servants, but they are worthy to serve God. They are holy. They have never sinned. They are suitable for heaven. But me, I'm not a worthy servant of God. I might have done things that have been useful for God. I may have made a difference for God. Angels have done useful things. Angels have made a difference for God, but they have not got a great rack of sins and sinful thoughts and failures to do what they should do that I've got. When I have finished what God has given me to do, I should say, John, you have just been an unworthy servant. The highest servanthood that can be offered in this world to Jesus and to God is not what the Queen did, being a very important person who acknowledged her faith in Jesus and served for 70 years. The highest calling is to be martyred. And when you think about it for a moment, when someone dies as a martyr for Jesus, and there have been no shortage of them in the history of England and London, when you die a martyr, you do not get cheered, you get jeered. In fact, it's very similar to the way that Jesus himself died. It's usually public, it's usually scorned, and everybody is quite glad that you're dying, except a few who know otherwise. That's what happened when Jesus died at Calvary. But does that mean that you are somehow less? Revelation chapter 7. Then one of the elders asked me, "These in white robes, who are they and where did they come from?" I answered, "Sir, you know." And he said, "These are they that have come out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore, they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. Never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat, for the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes." This is what it is to be a servant. It is that you have to complete the task. What is really interesting in Luke 17 is that straight after a story which makes clear that the servants should not expect thanks for doing what they're supposed to do, comes a story where someone, in fact 9 people, should give thanks, but don't. It is the story of when Jesus heals 10 lepers. Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus travelled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go show yourselves to the priests." And they went, and they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." Isn't that an amazing story, to follow a story about not being thanked? You see, whereas the dutiful servants of God ought not to expect to be thanked for doing their duty, those who receive the grace of God, which is all of us, should indeed be very thankful to God. The thanks should be one way. I think that we are a bit inclined to think the thanks should be one way, but the wrong way. That when we do things for God, he should be really thankful. But we can be a bit optional about our thanks to him. But it turns out, from Luke chapter 17, it's exactly the other way round. This is how Christian duty works. We are doing our duty, but he is giving us undeserved goodness and grace. So whereas he shouldn't be thanking us for what we do, we should be thanking him for what he does, most of all, as in the case of these lepers, for his salvation, for the way he transforms our lives and gives us a future where we previously had one. And of course, in the story, the man who comes back is one who, well, was a Samaritan. He was one of the kind of outcast people who might well think, "I'm not going back to that Jew Jesus." But instead, he is thankful. And it becomes clear that Jesus takes great notice of whether we say thanks or not. Because instead of saying, "That's really nice that one of you came back to say thank you," he says, "Where are the other 9? It's not a plan. It's not a good plan to be waiting for thanks from God, who does not owe us thanks, while not giving thanks to God, to whom we owe thanks. It's not a good plan, but it is alarmingly close to the plan by which we can live our lives. And thankfully, it was not the plan by which Her Majesty the Queen lived hers. So let us learn from her, and learn from Luke, and learn from Jesus, and let us do our duty with thanks.